Welcome, my broskis. Recently, I decided to do something that I probably should have done a very long time ago. I sat down and played every single Starship Troopers first-person shooter. Well, every non-VR one, that is, because I don't own a VR headset. And you know what? I was actually surprised. All three games are genuinely good. The funny part is that they're also completely different from one another. So if you're looking to jump into the Starship Troopers universe, which one should you actually play? Well, that's exactly what we're going to figure out today. So let's start with the oldest one. This is still, without a question, the most authentic Starship Troopers game ever made. It literally continues after the first movie, which, let's be honest, is still the best one by a mile, and it absolutely nails the atmosphere. The voice acting feels right, the soundtrack fits perfectly, the environments look like they were pulled straight from the film, and the storytelling does a surprisingly good job of making you feel like you're actually part of the Mobile Infantry. It recreates a lot of those classic movie moments while still doing its own thing. There's also a huge variety of bugs to fight. Some of them I honestly don't even remember seeing in the movies, although they're probably buried somewhere in the lore. The same goes for some of the weapons, but that's honestly not a bad thing. It keeps the campaign fresh. And that's probably the biggest strength of the game. The campaign is incredibly varied. You're constantly doing different things, fighting in different locations, and dealing with different situations. It never really gets old.
Here it comes!
Now the downside of this game though is that it's a classic linear single player campaign. Once you've finished it, you've basically seen everything. There's very little reason to replay this one. And yeah, the game's age definitely shows a bit. Not so much visually, but mostly in the shooting. After playing the newer Starship Troopers games, you really notice how much weapon feedback has evolved. The bugs, they don't react nearly as satisfying when you shoot them, and the gunplay feels a bit stiff by today's standards. But honestly, that's about my only major complaint with this game. For a game from 2005, it still does some incredibly impressive things. The amount of bugs on screen is massive, and the developers used some really clever tricks with the backgrounds to make it look like the entire armies are charging at you, and it completely sells the illusion. So while the shooting has aged a bit, it's still a fantastic, varied and authentic Starship Troopers campaign that absolutely is worth playing if you're a fan of the movies. Now next up, my broskis, we have Starship Troopers Extermination, which is developed by Offworld Industries, the same people behind Squad. Now, this one couldn't be more different. Instead of a linear campaign, this is a 16-player co-op PvE shooter where you and 15 other troopers are dropped into absolute chaos against gigantic bug hordes. Most matches, they start off with a handful of objectives. You might be collecting resources, defending an area, hunting a specific bug, or securing equipment. Once those objectives are complete, the real fun begins. You and your team build an entire base from scratch. Walls, gates, towers, turrets, ammo stations, everything. You've only got a few minutes before the bugs arrive, and when they do, holy crap! I generally don't understand how this game even runs. Hundreds of bugs climbing over walls while 16 players unload machine guns, rockets, sniper rifles, mechs and automated turrets everywhere. The entire battlefield becomes complete insanity, yet somehow it all works. It also took me a while to actually appreciate it. The first time I played, I honestly bounced right off. There were too many systems, too many classes, too much happening all at once. But because I wanted to make this video, I decided to give it another proper chance. And once everything finally clicked, yeah, I completely got hooked on this one. Learning the 5 classes, understanding how to build properly, figuring out what your role is, it all starts making sense after a few matches. And suddenly, the chaos becomes part of the fun instead of something overwhelming. Now, they also recently added solo missions that actually helps a lot here. They're not a full-fledged campaign, or they are, but they're not a very well developed one, just short scenarios. But they're a great way to learn the mechanics before jumping in online.
Rearm and move to the next objective.
And I have to say that the community also deserves some credit here. People are genuinely helpful. I expected a bunch of players screaming because someone built a wall in the wrong place, but that almost never happens. And because every match depends on different classes, different teammates and different base layouts, it never really plays exactly the same twice. Now, if you do have a couple of friends as well to squad up with, this game becomes an absolute blast. So I totally went from not recommending this to absolutely recommending this one. And finally, we have Ultimate Bug War. This is basically the boomer shooter of the Starship Troopers franchise, developed by the same studio that made Bolt Gun. And you can absolutely tell. While Extermination has the biggest battles, Ultimate Bug War easily has the most satisfying combat. Every bug explodes with crunchy feedback, the weapons they feel fantastic, and despite the retro visuals, this is probably the most satisfying Starship Troopers games when it comes to simply pulling the trigger. Now the campaign in this one is made up of around 10 large open-ended levels. Instead of running through corridors, you're dropped into these compact open maps with multiple objectives that you can tackle in whatever order that you want to. It's a really cool structure, and I'd actually love to see more shooters experiment with this. Unfortunately though, that's also where my biggest complaint comes in. The objectives become repetitive way too quickly. Most of them boil down to running somewhere, activating something, defending it for a bit, and then moving on. There are a few bosses here and there, but not nearly enough to keep the mission structure feeling fresh. To mix things up, however, the game also lets you play several missions as the assassin bug, which is actually awesome. Charging through human soldiers as this giant killing machine feels fantastic. It's polished, it's powerful, and it's honestly one of the coolest parts of the game. I just really wish that the human campaign had way more variety throughout, because underneath those repetitive objectives is an incredibly polished, satisfying shooter that absolutely nails its combat. So if you're mainly looking for crunchy gameplay and old school boomer shooter action, this is probably the Starship Troopers game that I recommend first. And there you have it, my broskis. A quick rundown of the 3 Starship Troopers FPS games, and somehow all 3 of them managed to offer something completely different. Now, if you want the most authentic movie experience, go with Starship Troopers 2005. If you want massive co-op battles with friends, Extermination is where it's at. And if you're after pure crunchy boomer shooter action, Ultimate Bug War absolutely delivers. Now let me know down in the comments which one is your favorite. And if you want more brutal first-person shooter carnage just like this, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe. And I will see you in the next one. Over and out.